try not to ever get stuck at traffic lights. And this rule, it's not quite as precise as my rules on time because each traffic light, it's a unique situation. Because this rule revolves around one key metric. Can I make it through a yellow light before it turns red? And can't we all relate to this? I mean, no matter how safe you drive, we've all seen a light turn yellow and in a split second wondered if we should gun it or hit the brakes. And in this moment, like each of us is making a certain kind of decision, a decision that's based on the circumstances in that moment. And that decision, it's a judgment call. And judgment calls are a kind of decision that's subjective, right? Like if two people see a red light, they both stop. Like that's a binary decision. It's a simple yes or a no. It's a right or it's a wrong. But two people can see a yellow light and make two completely different decisions. They look at the situation and they make a call. They make a judgment based on their personal bias, background, and perspective. And these types of decisions, they're just a part of life. We make judgment calls outside of yellow lights all the time. And while there's no singular formula for making a judgment call, in general, they mostly go like this. We take our version of a situation and then apply our version of what we think is right. Let me say that again. We take our version of a situation and then we apply it to our version of what we think is right. And we make these kinds of judgments every day. And some of these types of judgments are light, right? Should I bring my lunch to work or should I go out to lunch? Should I take this route or that route to work? Should I spend my money on clothes or not? Should I have that second donut? These are all judgments that we kind of make every day that don't seem to matter all that much. But then there are the judgment calls that matter a lot more. Should I quit my job and try to find something better? Should I stay with friends or with that person? Should I send that angry text or that email? And should I post something political on Facebook? Like we're constantly making decisions based on what we see, think, or feel. And even if we're not aware of it. Like some of these judgment calls are more meaningful than others, but regardless of the situation, we make judgments based on what we think is right. And right typically varies from one person to another one. Maybe it's because we're so used to making these judgment calls in every other area of our lives that this tendency to judge, it can also leak into our relationships. And this is where things start to get complicated. Because instead of thinking about which option is better, we start deciding which people are better. And unfortunately, this tendency to judge others, oh my goodness, it can crop up even here at church. In fact, if we're being honest, Christians generally have a reputation for being judgmental. Now, that sounds harsh, but just think about it for a second. If you attend church regularly, it's easy to begin to think that you're better than people who don't. Or maybe you attend church regularly and you volunteer, and then you might begin to secretly think you're a more committed Christian. And let's just say maybe you don't come to church regularly. Hey, at least you're being real. At least you're being honest. At least you're better than the hypocrites who call themselves Christians. And maybe for those of you who don't drink, maybe it's easy to begin to think that you're better than people who do. Look, regardless of the situation, we all have an opinion about how people should live. And coincidentally, we usually determine we are the ones who are living the way that people in general should live. And look, let's just get very real. Judging others, oh, it can feel so good. Like there's something reassuring about feeling superior to another person. But as we all know, there's another side to judging people. It's a side that doesn't feel good. And that's when you're the one who is on the receiving end of the judgment. We like judging others, but we absolutely don't like it when others judge us. Like we hate feeling less than or not feeling good enough or feeling devalued. And ironically, when we see other people judging people, that can make us angry. Like we can't stand people who are judgmental and who are judging other people all the time. So needless to say, like our feelings surrounding this idea of judging, they're complicated. Judging is easy. It takes no effort at all. And we find ourselves doing it without even realizing it. And I think God knew we'd have a tendency to behave this way. And that's why Jesus made sure to address this issue pretty clearly. And so today we're looking at a story in the book of John, who was one of Jesus's followers. And it opens with Jesus teaching in the temple. And in the middle of his teaching, Jesus gets interrupted by a group of Pharisees. And in Jewish culture, Pharisees were in the top tier of the religious society. They obeyed all the rules down to the letter. And they even obeyed the rules that were made up to keep people from breaking the rules. Because they were such good people, the Pharisees took it upon themselves to point out all the shortcomings in other people. So the Pharisees were expert judges. They knew every facet of the religious law, and their knowledge gave them a position of superiority over all of the other Jewish people. But Jesus, however, he represented a seismic shift in how God interacted with people. And because of this shift, the Pharisees considered Jesus dangerous. They considered Jesus a threat to the religious status quo. So during Jesus' 3 years of ministry, the Pharisees continually evaluated and often criticized his every word, his every deed, and situation were really high. Back to the story. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him. Now, these teachers had set up a catch-22, because if Jesus agreed that she should be stoned, it could undermine his entire reputation as a loving and compassionate teacher. If Jesus says she shouldn't be stoned, then he was undermining sacred Jewish law. And so you can just imagine, everyone is there, everyone is listening, and everyone is holding their breath, especially the woman in question, as they watch this showdown between Jesus and this group of men. But Jesus surprised everyone by saying nothing. He said absolutely nothing. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. John does not share what Jesus wrote. I mean, it could have been anything. But I think the point is, Jesus didn't give the Pharisees the easy soundbite they wanted. Instead, after a moment, he flipped the question back on them. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. In other words, Jesus is saying, if your record is spotless, if your conscience is clear, if your past is perfect, then go ahead. Just step up. You can start delivering the verdict you think this woman deserves. So who wants to go first? And of course, as it turns out, no one did. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. It really is like a scene from a movie. I mean, everyone there knew that regardless of their public behavior, each of them had had an imperfect record in their personal and private lives. And what Jesus recognized and what he wanted these religious men to know is that everyone is guilty. Everyone is guilty of sin. If we think about it, we all know that we sin, but we have this tendency to think that our sin isn't as bad as everybody else's sin. And in this case, the woman's sin was apparently worse than the Pharisees' sin. But Jesus, he has this way of putting everyone in the same category. We're all sinners. No one is better than anyone else. And if we throw a stone at someone, if we judge them, that judgment call, it makes us hypocrites. And then John, he continues and shares what happened next. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. Jesus did something else incredibly poignant in this moment. So the religious laws, which the Pharisees knew really well, required 2 or more witnesses to hand out a punishment. And because of Jesus' statement, all of the other accusers had walked away. There weren't enough witnesses there to carry out the punishment. And Jesus made it clear that he wasn't going to either. Jesus both in this moment kept the law and he showed mercy. And in this entire scenario, Jesus was the only one present who could conceivably judge this woman. And Jesus, the only one who has ever been perfect and without fault, the only one who really is better because he has never done anything wrong, he still did not judge her. He refused to do it. And if Jesus chose not to judge someone, I mean, what makes us think we're the ones who are qualified to judge other people? And 2,000 years now have passed, but you and I still have a tendency to carry around some rocks, don't we? And we use gossip, we use sarcastic comments, we use eye rolls, we use disapproving conversations, we use posts on Facebook as our rocks. These are all things we use to make other people look bad and make ourselves feel good. But if Jesus was right, we're all guilty, which means we're all disqualified from the judging game. I mean, none of us has a right to throw a stone. So in light of our own faults and in light of Jesus's grace, I think we're all called to do this. When it comes to judging others, drop the rock. So how do we do that? Well, first, we can stop measuring sin and deciding which sins are worse. Like, we all have some sort of sin in our lives. There's no ranking order for sin. Nobody is perfect, and that includes us. So we can stop comparing our faults with the faults of other people. Like, we can stop applying that sliding scale, a scale that we've built, to everyone else's behavior. 2, we can spend less time thinking about others and just more time thinking about ourselves. Like, there's one person in your life you have the power to control and change, and it's you. So let's stop steering all of our energy towards someone else and start looking at what needs to change in our own life. Besides, trying to change other people, it is a maddening and frustrating experience. So let's redirect our energy toward ourselves. And third, and finally, we can start owning that we're hypocrites if we think we're better than someone else. But we'll never get better if we don't first call it like it is. So the next time you catch yourself talking badly about someone out loud or thinking poorly of someone in your head, just say this: I have no right to throw a stone. So today, I want you just to think about one person you've had your rock aimed at, one person you're the most tempted to judge. In your mind, I just want you to drop the rock. And when you start to do this, I think you'll begin to find not that you think less of yourself, but that you think more of Jesus. Like, you're gonna begin to see how great he is, how loving he is, how forgiving he is. And you'll stop seeing others as not having enough or being enough or doing enough compared to yourself. Instead, you're just going to see Jesus as being enough for everyone. And you'll treat others better and like others better. And everyone around you, including yourself, will be better for it.